Yesterday in the synagogue, we read a special portion called Parshat HaChodesh. HaChodesh means the month. And it is the first mitzvah that was given to the Jews in Egypt, that to establish the month. Every season, the Jewish months, which begin with Nisan, and they're important because the various Chagim, the holidays such as Pesach and Shavuos and Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, are determined by the various months in the Jewish month. And in addition, they were also commanded to set aside the sheep, which would become the Paschal lamb, on the 10th of that month. And they were to guard it, to make sure it did not get any blemishes until the 14th. It was sacrificed on the 14th, and it was eaten on the night of the 15th of Nisan. That's the night that we celebrate Passover at this time. For one day in Israel, for 2 days outside of Israel, we don't have the Passover sacrifice. However, we eat the other foods, such as the matzah, the bitter herbs, and we tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. It's interesting to note that there would seem to be a little bit of an ambivalence, because only a short while before this, when the plague of the admixture of wild animals, which brought Pharaoh to his knees, and he said he would allow the Jews to sacrifice their animals to Hashem, but he said his first position was, but don't leave the country, do it within the land itself. I'm giving you permission. But Moshe rejected that. He said, we can't do that, because remember that the sheep, which the Jews slaughtered, was the deity of Egypt. They deified the sheep. So he's saying, we're going to be slaughtering that which other people deify. They're going to kill us. That's the way people react when it comes to the disrespect for their religious icons and so forth. And Pharaoh did not reject that. He didn't say, I'll protect you. Now it is a few months later, and the Jews set aside the sheep on the 10th of the month, and they actually slaughtered it on the 14th. And there's no report of any kind of a adverse reaction from the Egyptians. They didn't do anything. There was no complaint and so forth. So what's going on over here? Apparently, we'd have to say, in my opinion, a change took place. In the course of time, as the plagues came down upon the Egyptians, they began to rethink matters. Because a person doesn't think about anything unless it bothers him, unless he has a problem. All right, so they accepted the fact that the Jews were enslaved. It didn't bother them that much. Just like Americans accepted the fact that the blacks were enslaved prior to the Civil War. They just assume if this is the way it is in the country, there must be some justification. However, it's only when people experience pain that they start to inquire. And my opinion is that when the Egyptians began to suffer because of the plagues, they began to think, why? Why is this happening? Oh, it's because Pharaoh won't allow the Jews to serve their God. And then it gets even stronger. So why are we suffering? Why are we enslaving the Jews altogether? What's the justification? And ultimately, they came to the realization that there was no justification, that the Jews were loyal people, that their ancestor Joseph had saved the country from famine, and that the Jews, since that time, had always been loyal. They built up the cities of Pithom and Ramses. They came to the conclusion that we had made a serious, serious mistake. And their entire attitude towards the Jews changed. It says in the verse itself that the man Moshe was extremely admired. They found favor in their eyes. They looked up to him. He was a great, great leader, even though he was the one that was bringing down the plagues upon them. It's an amazing type of a phenomenon. And as a result of this, when the Jews sacrificed to God, they didn't bother the Jews at all. They had obtained a certain admiration, perhaps even a fear of the Jews. A tremendous transformation of attitude. This should be extremely inspiring to us. We have faith in the ultimate vindication of the Torah and of the Jewish people and their mission in history. Now is a time when we need that faith, because again we're experiencing an outburst of anti-Semitism, condemnation, hatred. We're responsible for genocide. We know where that accusation comes from, because the world itself is responsible. They never got over the guilt of the Holocaust, so they need to project it onto the Jews. We cannot make any concessions. We have to stick fast to our principles. We have to be proud Jews who keep the Torah, with the faith that just as in the past, in the situation in Egypt, ultimately the truth was vindicated. The Gentiles began to see that the Jews were the ones who deserved admiration. So too, there will come a time, I don't know if it's that far off, when the world will recognize that they were in error. And the Jews truly are the people of God.